Ray Edwards Show back on a regular production schedule, God willing. And my first guest on this new season, my son, Sean. This was a good conversation about should we bring our faith into our workplace, and if so, how? Let's get into it.
All right.
We are rolling.
Rolling.
How long has it been since we've done this?
We've done a couple that never got published, so I don't actually know.
That's my problem. I need to publish them before I watch them too many times. That's why.
So I don't know when the last time one actually made it into the airwaves, because that's how this works now, right? It goes into the airwaves.
Yeah. Well, it does if you think about it. Wi-Fi.
That's true. That's true.
Satellite.
That's true.
Airwaves.
How much of your podcast do you think travel through satellites? Just
I don't know.
or any pod. I mean,
that's a good question.
Anyway, I don't know. I know some data. I guess if you're in Starlink, probably more. Did you see that a piece of one of those Starlink satellites like landed in someone's yard or something like that? And
did it kill them?
No. Still,
that's weird.
Yeah, not
There's
great.
a lot of junk.
There's a lot of junk in space.
Yeah.
A lot of junk in space.
Like if you were coming from outside the vicinity of Earth, trying to get to Earth, that would be kind of a obstacle course.
I've heard that it's actually, space is so big that it's actually not really that big of a concern.
That sounds real good until a bolt goes through your spacecraft.
Yeah.
Or cut your trip short.
But I'm assuming if you're approaching Earth, you're probably a sufficiently advanced civilization that a bolt isn't going to threaten you. Anyway.
Hello there.
Hello there.
We are back. I'm focused on the future.
Indeed.
I want to talk about something that has come up a lot in my personal discussions in mastermind groups and with some of my peers in the industry. Okay. And by the industry, I mean marketing online business.
Sure.
And it's not just online businesses, it's offline businesses marketing online.
Right.
Like coffee shops, for instance.
Coffee shops.
Revel 77.
Indeed.
Spokane, Washington.
Yep.
57th Avenue.
Oh, I don't have my...
Yeah, what's up with that? We'll just put it up on the screen.
We'll get it in post.
Yeah.
Look at this delicious coffee. If you go to revel77.com, you can order this delicious coffee.
And you should. That's where I got this coffee from, but there's no logo on the cup.
Oh, did it not get stamped?
No.
Oh.
Demerit.
Whoever's supposed to do the cup stamping on those 12 ounces, demerit.
Who's going in the box?
I don't know. To draw straws.
So the question that I was alluding to earlier was, how do you decide how much to bring your faith into your business? This client wants to talk about his faith in regards to his business, but he's a little nervous about it. He's like, I don't know how much he said, I like what you do, but I don't know if I'm brave enough to do that. So how does a business person decide how much is too much? Is it too much to have a Bible verse on the window of the store, or a fish, an ictus, or Bible verses on the cups? Well, what's too much?
Well, I mean, we all got thoughts and opinions on that. I mean, that's an interesting question. How did you answer him?
Well, I said, you might want to, I'll tell you what I do. You might or might not want to model it. But I felt like a long time ago, I felt like it was my calling to be a minister in the marketplace. So I put it right out front.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very clear from the moment you came to my website. Every podcast ends with, it's all about creating financial freedom. But remember, true freedom is available to all through Jesus Christ.
Right.
And so I'm very upfront about it. I wrote a book about Christians and money and the problems that we Christians have about money. We can talk about that later perhaps, but I'm very upfront about it. And Michael Hyatt put on an event in Nashville that I went to. I spoke at it. It was called the Platform Event, and somebody was asking who who I was. And we're at the reception after the event, and Michael said, "I can answer that. Ray is a writer who has a ministry disguised as a business." I thought, I like that. I kind of adopted it. But that, I thought it was very clever and funny, but a lot of people don't like that when I say that to them. They're like, you mean you're sneaky about it? You're just going to hit people by surprise with your pitch to join your cult.
Huh.
So I don't feel like I do that.
No.
I don't think there's one answer for every business. I think it depends on the business and the individual. I do think it's not a good idea to hide the fact you're a Christian so well that nobody can tell.
No.
I think that's a bad position to be in. Chuck Missler used to say, if you were put on trial for being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you?
Oh, good old Chuck. No, I don't hide it. I don't hide it. I don't lead with it. You know, when I was working with years ago when I was working with the mayor down in Fresno, that's the way she put it. She's like, I don't hide it. I don't lead with it, but I don't hide it. So, and I kind of like that position. You know, the coffee shop is different from your business. Obviously, you're educational, business coaching, marketing, trying to help people grow their own business, find their messaging, get it out there. It kind of lends itself to a little bit more of talking about some of those things in your principles, even like in you're teaching people how to market or how to structure their business, even just like ethically, like how should you do things. I think it makes it easier to talk about and for faith to kind of come up in that way. You know, the coffee shop is a service-based business. We got people coming in. We're not like training them to start their own businesses or anything like that. We're making them a cup of coffee and we're saying hi to them. We're checking in with them. We're getting to know them. And so it's a different context. And so I don't hide it. I don't lead with it. And that's, yeah, I think all my employees know. They know that I'm Christian. They know that I'm Catholic. They know that I go to church. And but I don't make it a point to like, I guess that's the other thing I was going to say is like when you're dealing with this question, one of the things I would reflect on is like where is the impetus coming from to talk about it or to not talk about it? Is it coming from a free place of, hey, this is just who I am and I don't want to hide who I am and I feel like I'm having to hide myself, and maybe you need someone to encourage you to be like, hey, don't hide who you are. Tell people who you are. I think sometimes it can come from a not so free place where it's like, I want people to know I'm Christian. Like it's almost like part of your branding. And I think people can, I think that's probably not healthy on multiple fronts. I think
do you think that's like you're trying to profit from the gospel? Or
I think that's one aspect of it, but I think it could even be more subtle than that. I think it can be
virtue signaling.
Yeah, maybe a little virtue signaling, but also even deeper than that. Like I think it can come from a fairly authentic place, but it's not coming. This is going to get like sound super spiritual, but it's not coming. You're not being led to do it by the Lord. Like God isn't asking you to do it. Like you're feeling like it's your job. Like, oh, I need to tell people about the gospel. Like it's almost like it's my responsibility. I have to do this. Like it's part of who I am. I have to do this, and it's not coming from a free place in God. And I think that can I think it's kind of hard to describe and can be hard to discern, but I think it has to come from a reflection of God, what are you asking me to do? What are you asking me to do in this business? What are you asking me to do on this earth? And one person, I used to blog a lot about politics and I kind of got out of that. And I was thinking about getting back into it because I have some opinions and thoughts on things.
Yeah. You used to stir up so many problems. It was fun.
And I was talking with a friend, a fellow Christian and Catholic, and he just kind of posited it this way. He's like, well, if you do go back to writing about it, I think you need to adopt the mindset of God doesn't need you to write about it. Like you can, but God doesn't need you to do it. Like I think sometimes we can appropriate onto ourselves, like the fate of the world almost rests on whether or not we're being a proper
I
witness,
got to be a soul winner.
right? Or something like that,
And
you
that's,
know?
I'm not making fun of that. That's,
Or like oh my gosh, the country's going in the wrong direction, and someone's got to stand up for the truth. And
there's a lot of those folks.
there are a lot of those folks, and there's nothing wrong about defending the truth. You should, but when you're kind of putting the weight of the world, or like feeling like you have some sort of sense of control on what's going on, and that like you need to project your values out there to try to like shift the direction the country's going to go in or whatever, unless God's like given you that platform, like you're, someone like Joe Rogan or, a lot of these other podcasters and stuff, like most of us don't have the ability to do that, and God's not giving that to us, but we're like clinging to it. And we're like grabbing on. I don't know. I'm kind of getting off on more of like a thinky thought, philosophical, theological tear there, but it's like, it's all going back to like when you're in your business and you're Christian, like where is it coming from? Like, are you feeling like, oh man, if I talk about my faith, I'm afraid I'm going to lose customers? Well, I think there you need to have a little bit of faith that God's is going to back you.
Yeah.
That like, he wants you to boldly proclaim him. And I mean, I think there's even a parable that's like whoever's
ashamed of me before man,
yeah,
I'll
right,
be ashamed of him before the Father.
right. Woo. Like,
Yeah.
so don't do that, and like trust that God's gonna back you. And if you lose customers, then those are customers you probably ought not to have anyway. And that he'll bring people to you. Like ultimately it's all in his hands. And so you just need to like be who you are. But at the same time, I don't want you to go to the other extreme and be like, oh, I gotta get out there. And like, it's like, if I don't put a Bible verse in my window, then I'm not being a witness to the world. And it's like, like unless God's asking you to do that, like you feel like from a peaceful, free place, you feel led to do that. Like if you're feeling like you need to do it, I would back off from that. And so I like the motto of I don't hide it, but I don't lead with it. Because I think when we lead with it, sometimes we can kind of make it too much of our identity, and it can become like a piece of our marketing. It can become a piece of our and our identity. Like obviously we want to be found in Christ. What I mean is like more like the label. The label becomes part of our identity, not necessarily like the deeper spiritual walk. Obviously that needs to be a deep part of our identity, but it's like, I'm the Christian businessman or woman or whatever. Like this is who I am and what I do. And it's on my briefcase, and I don't even know if people still have briefcases, but you know what I mean? Like that, I think that that comes from an unhealthy place. And I also think that turns a lot of people off. They can kind of sense that when it's a little bit of a sales pitch. So.
Briefcases only used to carry nukes now. So I agree with you. In truth, when the person asked me the question, my answer was instantly, I don't know how not to. And that's my real answer. I don't know how not to. People ask me like, how did you come up with that idea?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was inspired.
Yeah.
Or why do you, well, I don't want to go too deep into that. What about things like there's legalities involved here, but even that is a question worth pondering. I wrestled for a while with praying in the business.
Sure.
Like we pray at our business meetings and before our mastermind meetings and so forth. And I wrestled with that because there's some gray area. And I had a couple of clients, and I had one employee at one time say, I don't think that's legal. I don't think you can do that. Well, there's nothing that'll get me riled up like tell me what I cannot do. So that's probably not the right attitude, but what about that? And what if somebody comes into the coffee shop and they start talking to you and they say, I don't know what to do. I'm in a real terrible situation. I think I'm going to have to, and they mentioned doing something abhorrent, like stealing or something worse.
Well, I mean, I'll say so. I mean, again, I think there are a couple different things you kind of brought up there that could be talked about. Like one is like praying in the workplace. I don't overtly do that. We don't like start the day with a prayer, something like that. But I wouldn't be opposed if, like, I think that's totally appropriate. I don't think there's anything legally anyone could do there. The only thing that you may want to consider is the comfort level of your entire staff, and like
Mhm.
is like again is like what are you, there's a certain element of practically it's also like what is your business there to do, you know, like what's it there to do. um it's sometime you're a mechanic shop, you know, like you're someone brings you a broken car.
And you can't figure it out, you gotta pray and ask God, "What's wrong with this car?"
Sure, but like they came to you to fix their car, not to like get a sermon or to be preached at.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like, so I do think that there's just like a natural it's fitting that your priority there is to fix their car and not evangelize them. Now, if God opens a door for you to have that conversation, sure, go ahead. But like I wouldn't want to like force it on everything. Oh, here's your fixed muffler and a verse. I mean, I don't know. This maybe that
Yeah, no, no, I
whatever's
get what you're saying, and I think here's part of it we haven't talked about. It's discerning the relationship you have with each person and knowing when you're pushing against a boundary
yeah.
or when you're helping.
I I had a you know, honestly I had a real wake up call in during the pandemic when it came to proselytizing. And I think this affects my perspective, and it might be helpful for other people. I think you've heard this story, but maybe as a reminder. But like I had this gal working for me, and she was not Christian. You know, she was living a different lifestyle, and over the years of having her work for me, I had tried to like have meaningful conversations with her, and they just wouldn't go anywhere. She shut them down. She didn't want to talk about them. At one point, she even just flatly said, "I don't want to know your opinion on this because then I'm afraid I'm going to have to judge you," which is funny. Uh, but it was in the middle of the pandemic and it was coming up on Easter, and I had just kind of stopped doing all that. I'd given up on it. I was like, whatever. These conversations happen, they'll happen. And she one day she was like, "Hey, you know, Easter's coming up, and can you explain to me like why Jesus is such a big deal? Like why Easter? What is all this about?"
Oh.
And that led into like hours of really deep, meaningful conversation. And uh, you know, she had never really heard the gospel before, and so we had to go through everything. She didn't know the Exodus story. She didn't know Adam and Eve. She didn't know any of that stuff. And like out like multiple over the course of like 2 or 3 days, several hours each, these conversations of trying to explain, you know, the existence of God, why Jesus came to the earth, like what does it mean that he died for our sins, that sort of thing. And there came a moment where she had an aha moment, and it really like clicked to her, and she's like, "Wow, that's actually really beautiful. That's amazing, and maybe I should go to church for Easter." And I was like, "Yeah, maybe you should." Anyway, she actually took another job a few months later, and I kind of lost track with her, so I don't ultimately know what ended up with her, but that was such an eye-opening experience of like, okay, it's like the Lord who convicts and opens people up. Like
Mhm.
we like I don't know how many times I tried to force that conversation to happen, and it just shut her down, and she didn't want to have the talk. And when I just like backed off, and again, didn't hide what I believe, but I didn't lead with it. When she was ready, she made it known. And I'm sure the Spirit prompted her to ask that question. You know, like it wasn't just her own. I'm sure God prompted her to ask that question when she was ready to have that conversation, and it was a very meaningful, fruitful conversation. So that was really eye opening. And after that, I was just talking with a Catholic priest friend that I've become really good friends with about it, and we were just kind of reflecting on how so much evangelism and proselytization can kind of come from ourselves and what we want for the person. Like I want this person to be saved, and so I'm gonna read them. I'm gonna give them this tract. I'm gonna give them a Bible. I'm gonna share the gospel with them because I want them to be saved. And it's like that's not what the Lord's doing with them, right in that moment. And when God's doing something, it's free and it's open and it isn't forced and it isn't clunky. It's and like we're just kind of along for the ride. Like
Yeah.
we're not the one making it. So I feel like if you're making it happen, that might be a sign that that's coming from you and not from God. And so when I'm looking at my business, I kind of look at it the same way. It's like, oh, I let people know. And
So, like, if you're a Christian rock band and you get the privilege of playing the halftime show at the Super Bowl, you wouldn't go in and surprise everybody by using that to just play music that's all about your Christian agenda.
I mean, I would have to pray about it because that is a little bit of an interesting hypothetical, because that
Yeah.
you are given quite a platform there. And I would take that before the Lord and be like, how would you want me to, how could I do this that would glorify you? How would you want me to use this time so it doesn't just like fill my bank account, but like ultimately does ultimately. And so, but I also wouldn't want to like, so that would be a hypothetical situation I have to think through. But again, I wouldn't want to force it. I would want to pray about that. But going back to the business thing, like praying in the business or some of the ethical questions of, what was the other thing you brought up? It was not just praying in the business. What was the thing you brought up after that? I can't remember.
It was if you were, for instance, working behind the bar and somebody came
Oh,
in.
Yeah.
And you knew the answer to their question.
Yeah.
There was a definitive answer.
Oh, well, this has happened. I mean, I've seen one of the great things about Revel is that we get to know our customers, and some of them are regulars, and a lot of them aren't Christian. And so I've had instances where people come in and they, you get to know them and they just kind of start sharing about their life. And the beautiful thing about Christianity, specifically, I would say traditional apostolic Christianity, is that there's deep, deep, deep wisdom that flows out of natural philosophy or natural wisdom. So you can offer, once you're steeped in it, you can offer people practical advice on what's going on in their life without getting preachy. So, someone comes in and they're talking about their struggling relationship and the fact that they found out that maybe their boyfriend or girlfriend is cheating on them, or maybe it's not even they're cheating on them. It's just like the relationship's kind of falling apart, and you get like there was one person in particular. He was talking about his relationship with his girlfriend and how they'd been living together for a few years, and it was just like really codependent and manipulative. And I didn't go, well, Jesus wants you to be free, and manipulation isn't free, so you shouldn't be in that relationship. Like I didn't do that, but I was able to speak into, and a couple of other staff members were able to speak from their place of faith and offer like real wisdom of like, well, does love actually, like, if you're truly going to love someone, are you going to demand that they behave this way or that way? Or and like we were able to help them see, it's like, oh yeah, that's not really like a healthy attachment that we have. And obviously that wisdom came from our faith and came from being like steeped in that tradition and understanding all the wisdom that's in it. But we could offer it in a way that wasn't super preachy. And then, there are other instances where the faith kind of comes into it more prominently. It just kind of depends on the conversation that you're having with it. But yeah, I mean, again, like I think it's really helpful to lead with, like to not hide it, but not lead with it, because if you make yourself a friend, then people will come and ask for your input. Mm-hmm. But if you preach and you kind of force it on people,
yeah,
they will shut down and not come to you.
Anytime you cross that barrier and you start telling people what they're doing wrong and how to do it right, you're really seen as attacking them. It's how it feels to them.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I was just noticing a couple of our bigger stars in the world of TV and cinema today are Christians and well known for being Christians, but they're not preachy. They don't lead with it. Alan Ritchson is one of them. Ritchson,
right?
Jack Reacher,
mm-hmm.
And Chris Pratt.
That's right. Yeah,
is another.
Yeah,
and I don't know everything. I haven't seen every situation where they talk about their faith, but what I have seen has been very appropriate. I think it was appropriate to the context of the conversation and to them being authentic and being careful and graceful about what they were doing and saying.
Absolutely. And I think Hollywood, that's a tricky place, because I've heard from multiple people who are Christian. You see them in interviews and podcasts where they talk about once they kind of come out with that, they almost get blacklisted.
Yeah.
And that's sad. But honestly, that's God's going to be able to work with that and through that. So that's not like a checkmate play on their part, but yeah. So I don't know. That's, again, if someone was asking me about my business, I'd be like, well, all my employees know. I don't hide it,
mm-hmm.
but I don't I don't preach. I don't lead with it. I don't make it important. Not all of my employees are Christian either. I also don't just make it a point to only hire Christians. So I do have a somewhat of a diverse staff when it comes to the spirituality. Actually, at this point, a lot of them are Christian, but there are a couple that aren't. So I don't know. It's interesting. It's also being in a coffee shop. You are kind of on the front lines of the culture. You got people coming in from all sides of the gambit, all sides of the spectrum, and so you're dealing with people all the time. And yeah, I don't know.
Good answers. Well, it's not an easy question, and there's a lot of nuance, and it's a sensitive world today. People get their feelings hurt so easily.
They do.
Um,
They do.
I think this expectation that the world's going to be careful not to trigger me is a false expectation. Whether it's right or not, whether everybody should be careful about not triggering you or not, they're going to.
Yeah, it's pretty wild that we have landed in a world where like we're policing what other people say because we don't want to become offended. Now, I actually do think that the people promoting that set of values is actually a small group of people.
Yeah.
Like and they just had the biggest microphones for a while. And I think that started to break before the election, but I think the election was a big like, hey, like we're not okay with a lot of this stuff that's going on. And I mean, you got people, it's so interesting because you've got people who 10 years ago would have identified as democratic and liberal, who, ended up very flamboyantly voting for Trump this round, not because they're actually like diehard conservative and Republicans, but because so many people on the left had abandoned things like free speech and or endorsing compelled speech and endorsing. It's just kind of wild that that's the world we've landed in. And yeah, so fortunately we live in the United States with the First Amendment, so we don't have to worry about that too much. But other places in the world are getting swallowed up by this thing, and it's kind of weird to watch.
Yes, it is. I'm glad I'm not in charge of it.
I'm glad I'm not in charge of it, and I'm glad I don't live in England. Like, it's really sad to see what's going on in England.
Yeah, I'm sad about that. I love that country. I love the people there. We both have very good friends who live there, who are citizens there.
Now police can show up because you posted. I don't know. Anyway, that's not really what we're talking about. I didn't mean to get us sidetracked, but it's
so one more question, and we'll wrap this one up. But I wanted to explore just a little bit about how, in terms of not your public persona, but in the practice of your business, how does your Christianity show up in the practice of day-to-day business?
I mean, it shows up a lot. It has to, because if you're living an authentic faith, it's going to affect every aspect of your value set and value system. So it's going to affect how you treat your employees, how you pay your employees, whether or not you abide by certain laws and regulations, and how you treat your customers. So it shows. I mean, it shows up in so many ways. I mean, it's hard. I mean, it's hard to even start picking out examples, but like dealing with conflict with customers, or not customers, with staff. It's like you're hopefully your faith is forming you and shaping you with these certain set of values of respect for your fellow man and brother and sister and humanity, and showing them a certain set of dignity. So you're not going to screw your employees over. You're not going to underpay them. You're not going to steal from them, on their paychecks or whatever. And you're going to give them what they earned, and you're going to treat them with respect when it comes to disciplinary issues of not being passive aggressive and manipulative, but kind of standing up and having the hard conversation. And I mean, those are struggles, because I think we all have, even people who are good at conflict. I would say most people, even who are good at conflict, don't like conflict.
If you like conflict, you might want to get some counsel.
There's something kind of off. So I think it's a temptation for everyone. At least it is for me. When someone's not doing something that I want them to do it, it's a temptation to try to find a way to solve the problem without actually addressing the problem. And I know that like without actually just having the straight up conversation, but having kind of some sort of secretive behind maybe like sending a message out to everyone. Hey guys, like this is how we need to be doing things.
That's so lame. Don't do that.
But when really there's like one person
then
doing
everyone gets mad because they think, we know you're talking about
so and so.
sassafras.
Yeah,
Right.
right. Yeah. But like I said, I think we can all feel that temptation because no one loves. Well, again, if you do love, you got an issue. But being truly shaped by your faith means you're going to give people respect and you're going to be straightforward and you're going to have that talk with them even if you don't want to.
Yeah.
It also means having a certain amount of compassion on people. It's a tightrope, it's like you got a business. Your business needs to perform a certain way. Your employees need to perform a certain way, and maybe one of your employees is underperforming, and it's easy to get angry and frustrated and be like, "Why can't you do the simple thing that I'm paying you to do?" And then,
but when you put that off, you end up costing yourself money, costing the business money, productivity. You may cost your. I mean, you could ultimately see your business tank.
Right.
Everybody loses their job.
Yeah.
That's super dramatic, but it happens.
So it's just like having the empathy to be, to have some charity towards your employees, but at the same time to also still hold them to a standard and be like, okay, I know you're going through this thing and I'm really sorry. I also, need you to perform your job well.
Yeah.
Obviously you have the conversation, but I mean, being able to do both of those things like that, all that stuff, it shows up every day and how you make your decisions and how you relate to people. And I mean, that would be a real like check on like if you're not treating your employees well or you're not treating your customer or you're trying to like screw your customers over of like, well, what's like, where's that coming from? Like if you're trying to justify why it's okay to do something maybe gray and unethical, then you need to kind of ask where that's coming from. I don't know.
Well, good, deep thoughts. That's what I like. In fact, I got 2 notes here for myself in this podcast. One is consider changing the name of the podcast to Thinky Thoughts, something you said earlier. And number 2 is I want to see my therapist about how I feel about having used the term sassafras pants while discussing an imaginary person.
I do have to give credit that gal that was working for me I was talking about earlier, she's the one who introduced me to the term thinky thoughts. She would pose an idea to me and I'd start kind of going deep and she's like, oh, that's a thinky thought. I was thinking much more practical about like this drink I wanted to make. And I was like, oh,
beautiful. I love that. I'm going to look it up and see if there's a Thinky Thoughts podcast on it. All right, man. So we'll be back. We'll do another one of these next time. We'll talk about something thinky
and thoughty.
Yep.
Cool. Sweet. Fun.
All right. Our next episode, we're going to dive into AI with one of the best AI tools I have used yet. I love this tool. Imagine you could have all the different AI models in one low-cost tool. I'm going to be talking to the developer of that tool, and you'll find out what it is in the next podcast coming up in a couple of days. See you then. Until that time, God bless you. May He do more for you than you can ask or even possibly imagine. See ya.